Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, now I want to talk about if you have your rising sign, which is your ascendant, in the sign of Sagittarius. This means that Jupiter is your ruling planet. So we're going to talk about where Jupiter is, what this all means for you. But before I go any further, I want you to know that you can sign up for my free newsletter by going to my website. Sign up for it, galacticcenter.org, and you will have all my predictions delivered to your email address weekly. Plus, check out my new magazine, Joni Patry's Astrology Insights. You will not want to miss it. We have everything that's going to be happening for you and in the world in this magazine with fascinating articles. Plus, July is the month to sign up for the university because the University of Vedic Astrology is just starting the first semester. You can begin at ground one with a whole new group of curious, fascinating people of like-mindedness. Go to universityofvedicastrology.com. And remember, my website is galacticcenter.org. Okay, let's get going here. Let's talk about if you have your rising sign, which is your ascendant. Remember, the rising sign is the sign that's rising on the eastern horizon at your time of birth. So in order to know what your rising sign is, that's another thing. I want you to make sure you know what your sidereal rising sign is. And you can find this out by going to my website, galacticcenter.org, and go to my free chart calculator. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and where it says AS, that's your rising sign. And you will know which one to listen to as I go through all 12 of the signs. But today I'm covering Sagittarius in great depth. So if your rising sign is Sagittarius, this means Jupiter is your chart ruler, because I always look at the chart ruler as the planet that rules your rising sign. And whatever house that planet goes to gives volumes of information of who you are and what you're going to be interested in throughout your life. This is so vitally important. But let's talk a little bit about what Sagittarius is all about. Generally, as a whole, Sagittarius is the sign of finding truth. And many people with this sign prominent will be into even the legal practice, something about finding the truth, or research, finding the truth. They don't care what the truth is, if it's going to be bad or good. They just want to know what's real. And this is a very spiritual sign. Sagittarians are philosophers, spiritualists, psychologists. They're people who want to help the world at large. And it's one of the most adventurous signs because Jupiter and Sagittarius love travel. They love adventure, seeing things, going around the world. They love higher learning. When you think about it, Sagittarius is the ninth sign. Therefore, all the qualities of what the ninth house is all about will be more information as to what this sign is all about. So higher learning, education, travel, philosophy, spirituality, religion, beliefs, all of this is part of what this sign loves and what it's truly about. The ninth house is said to be the most blessed house of the chart. It deals not only with philosophy, law, spirituality, all the things I've mentioned, but it is also the house of luck and blessings. So this can mean that that Sagittarius is a very fortunate sign. It's a fire sign. So fire signs are very inspirational. They need inspiration. They inspire others. They love to teach and give people that spark, that fire to learn, that dharma. Dharma is the fire signs. So this dharma is a sense of purpose. This is what Sagittarius is all about. But most of all, finding out the truth. That's why Some people with the sign really strong or ninth house go into the area of law, the legal practice, but that's the man-made law. I always say they usually go into the higher laws, which is the spiritual laws that govern the world. The law of cause and effect and karma. They're into it. But it is a sign that can be so strong in its beliefs that, let me tell you, they don't like to be wrong. They're always right, you know. And the other thing about this is they are very, 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 don't get mad at me, but you can be very, very opinionated. When you feel something, you feel like you've got to tell the world. You know, some signs, they may feel like they know everything, but they don't bother to tell the world. That's kind of the Aquarius side. You know, they're like, I'm too smart. I'm too all-knowing. I'm not going to waste my energy on trying to convince them. But you love to convince people of what you know to be the truth. So you're very outspoken and very opinionated. I say sometimes Sagittariuses can be, it's my way or the highway. Sometimes, not always, don't get me wrong, because it's a very spiritual sign. But sometimes it can be very fanatical and dogmatic. And that's something you're going to want to avoid going into. Because, you know, astrology is if you know yourself, you can change the things you don't like about yourself. So this can be a very, very spiritual, wonderful sign. Just make sure you don't feel so opinionated that you have to convince everyone to think the way you do. It's just not going to happen. And it is a waste of energy. Most people don't change unless they have to. But let me go into the different nakshatras according to the degree of your rising sign. If your rising sign sits between 0 and 13 degrees 20 minutes, then your ascendant sits in the nakshatra Mula, which actually sits right in the galactic center, which this is deep. Mula's symbol are a bunch of roots that are gathered and tied together. So what that actually means, this is called the root star. So people with this rising always want to get to the core and the bottom of things. Get me to the root of everything. They're searching, they're seeking, they gotta have answers. But this nakshatra is also ruled by Nriti, the god of destruction, goddess of destruction. So Nriti will destroy in order to heal and start over. It's actually the destruction of worlds so that there can be new beginnings. But in that process, I find that people that have Mula rising can be somewhat destructive to themselves. And you got to watch that, because self-destruction doesn't help anyone. And you got to realize when you're doing it. So being self-destructive through any means of escaping the world, alcohol, drugs, or anything that can harm yourself, negative thoughts, negative attitudes, all of these are self-destructive and self-defeating. And many times with this nakshatra, people can be like this. But I've also found people that want to go into healing and medicine, use herbs, because it is the root nakshatra, dealing with roots. So actually people literally go into homeopathy or healing or working with herbology and something with health. But with the entire sign of Sagittarius, it doesn't like to be told it's wrong, but sometimes you just got to bite your lip and get over it. It's a better way to be than to fight it, unless it's going to make a difference. You got to ask yourself, will this make a difference if I speak out? And generally, with some of the people you're communicating with, it's not. So you don't have to be right. What is the saying from the Course in Miracles? I love that. Would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? So sometimes you don't have to be right. Just don't say it. But really hard for Sagittarians, especially the entire sign, to do that. So, moving on, if your ascendant degree sits between 13 degrees 20 minutes and 26 degrees 40 minutes, then your rising sign sits in the nakshatra Purva Ashada. Means the early victory. Remember, Purva means former and Uttara means latter. So this means the former victory, and it means you can be very victorious and successful earlier in life. Uttara Ashada is later in life. It's the latter victory. But did you know that this is called the invincible star? And you can be so determined, invincible, and strong about what you believe and who you are. And it's good to be this way about who you are, because you're going to succeed early in life. But this doesn't really pertain to people, but it is good to know because it pertains worldly events. And when we have new moons, full moons, or planets around these degrees, it can deal with declarations of war. So this can be meaningful to know this. But the symbol for Purva Ashada is the elephant tusk. Actually, the elephant tusk symbol is for both the Ashadas, Purva and Uttara, but it's also a fan. And it means it will fan information around the world. It will get the information out there. So this is a very talkative and a very well-learned nakshatra that has purpose and meaning and inspiration to pass information around to the world. And this nakshatra sits on the star of the Archer. Remember, it's the Archer, the symbol of the sign of Sagittarius. Now let's talk about if your rising sign sits between 26 degrees 40 minutes of Sagittarius all the way to the last degree of the sign, 30 degrees of Sagittarius. Then this means your rising sign sits in the nakshatra Uttara Ashada, which means the latter victory, which means probably your success will come later in life. But it is called the universal star. So this is a big, broad position and deals with victory. And it's ruled by the Vishnudevas, which are the universal gods. So it's very God-fearing, very altruistic to itself. It is very, very righteous. Both the Ashadas and the sign of Sagittarius deals with righteousness, sometimes fanatically so, and justice. Want to find justice. That's what you're all about. That's why you want the truth. You want the justice to be served. And Uttara Ashada sits in close to the star Vega in the lyre of the musical instrument in the heavens, and sometimes they can be very musical. So watch for that. Now, let's talk a little bit about where your Jupiter sits, because as I said, this is so meaningful when you know where your Jupiter sits, because it is your chart ruler. So if you have a Sagittarius ascendant and Jupiter sits in your first house, you are very lucky. You have Jupiter in Sagittarius in your first house. And this means you have a Hamsa Yoga, Jupiter in its own sign of rulership in an angle in the first house. So this is phenomenal to have. And what it actually means is everything that Jupiter's about is definitely who you are. You're a truth seeker, you're a philosopher, you're a spiritualist, and you would never consider, remember this, all the Ashadas would never consider telling a lie. It's beyond your comprehension. And it really bothers you when people do lie, because it's so wrong to you. So Jupiter in Sagittarius in the first house will protect you, make you very spiritual, and it's all about your development. Just make sure with Jupiter here, You don't always have to push your agenda onto others. Okay, if you have your chart ruler Jupiter in Capricorn, it will be in your second house. So if Jupiter's in your second house, that means it's in Capricorn. And this is actually its debilitation sign. But I have never seen Jupiter in Capricorn being something terrible or bad. Actually, what I've seen is it gives the ability to earn and make money. Even though they say its debilitation sign weakens it, I've seen many, many wealthy people with Jupiter in Capricorn. It means business comes first. They're very business-minded instead of spiritually minded. So they're materialistic, and therefore that's their goal and their focus, and they become very wealthy. Jupiter in the second house in Capricorn with Sagittarius rising. Money is important. Family's important there. And you may be somewhat opinionated, but Jupiter being weak, I don't think you're going to press the issue as much. But boy, are you convinced deep down that you're right. Now, if you are Sagittarius rising and you have your Jupiter in the third house, this means Jupiter's in Aquarius. And in the third house, Jupiter, you have a love of travel, of learning, and you care a lot about others and humanity, and you have a lot of friends, and probably you're pretty close to your brothers or sisters. If you have any, and generally Jupiter being in the third house with Sagittarius rising, you could be the youngest one in your family. But I think you'd have a good relationship with siblings, and you might spend time visiting them quite often. And you probably did pretty well in school, especially in the early formative years with Jupiter in the third house. But you love to travel, you love to learn, and you love life. So let's say your chart rule. Oh, and one more thing. You love to write. Something about communications is what you're really, really good at. Writing and creating and putting things out there. So let's say you're a Sagittarius rising and you have Jupiter in your fourth house. This means you have Jupiter in Pisces. And once again, this is one of the Mahapurusha yogas called the Hamsa Yoga. Jupiter being in its own sign in an angular house. It means everything Jupiter's about is who you are, a philosopher, a spiritualist, a judge, someone that wants righteousness and wants justice, everything to do with what Jupiter's about. And I'll tell you something else with Jupiter being here in the fourth house, real estate. That's something you need to get into because you'll make tons of money on real estate, Jupiter in the fourth. And you'll live in a large, big house, or you'll live in a house with a lot of land around you, especially so. The house, the property, real estate could even be inherited from family, particularly your mother. So that's really important for you to know. Jupiter in the fourth house. And family is very important. Your security and your family come first. Let's say you're Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in the fifth house. Then this means your Jupiter is in Aries. Jupiter likes to be in Aries. It's a friendly sign for Jupiter, and it means that you are able to express yourself, especially around the areas of things you love to create, artistic pursuits. Creating businesses. This is the house of entrepreneurs. Jupiter in Aries, you're a pioneer. You start businesses, you start new things. You love it. You're excited. You have fabulous ideas. And you could have some very progressive children. Children that are progressive and future-minded and creative themselves. So one more thing, you could be pretty good in investing in investments with your chart ruler being Jupiter in the fifth house. Okay, let's say you're a Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in the sixth house. This means you got Jupiter in Taurus. Jupiter doesn't necessarily like to be in Taurus, but I'll tell you, you got to be very immersed in the healing arts. You love healing. You love anything to do with learning how to improve your life, make it better. You work well with others in the workplace, and you love animals. This is the house of pets, and Jupiter being here, especially in the sign of Taurus, it's sweet, it's kind. You love the beauty of nature and animals. And you may even go into some field with animals or with agriculture, or even something to do with food or diet or nutrition here. And also being in Taurus, you know, flowers, greenery, that's what heals your soul, the outdoors. You love it, and healing and helping other people. So let's say you have a Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in the 7th house. Well, this means it's in Gemini, and Jupiter in Gemini, hey, you're looking for somebody in a relationship that you can totally relate to and understand. This means your chart ruler goes to the marriage house. You need relationship. It's how you feed your soul to share with someone else. And in communication, because this is in Gemini. And you have to have a partner that has a great sense of humor. Laughs with you, laughs funny, very funny. And this is what heals your soul: humor and communication and traveling with your partner and making things work with your partner in partnerships and marriage. This is so important for you. Now, let's say you have a Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in the 8th house. Wow. Because this means you have Jupiter exalted in the 8th house. You are incredibly metaphysical, spiritual. You have incredible psychic and intuitive skills that are off the charts. You got to do something with this. Furthermore, you will come into a large inheritance at some point in your life, because the 8th house is inheritances and Jupiter is all powerful in the sign of Cancer. Or you may marry a very wealthy man or woman, because this is the house that is the second from the 7th, meaning your partner's money. But you love to go deep into research and analysis. Never do you leave a stone unturned. Okay, let's say you have Sagittarius ascendant and you have Jupiter in your 9th house. Well, this means you have Jupiter in Leo. And this is so expansive, and it means you have a love of travel, adventure. You're very fiery in what you want to learn, and you are a leader at all costs, especially in spiritual arenas with other people, in philosophy and psychology. Another thing, you probably have a pretty powerful father. Maybe your father is a leader of some sorts, and is very powerful. And you want to please him. You want to look good in his eyes because he is who he is. Yes, but adventure and travel and even teaching is going to be a career that you pursue. Okay, let's say you are Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in the 10th house. Wow, your career is your focus throughout life, but you choose a career where you do so much tedious analytical work because your Jupiter's in Virgo. You love to analyze things, leave no detail unturned, and you work well with others, and you expect other people in your workplace or your business to work well with others. You will continually rise in position because you are so good at the work you do. You're gifted and you're well known for it. Your reputation will be stellar throughout life. Let's say you have a Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in the 11th house. Well, this means that your Jupiter sits in Libra in the 11th house. It means you're surrounded by a lot of friends, groups, and people all the time. People like you, and you get along with people really well with Jupiter being in the sign of balance, Libra. You know when to let things go and not have to be right. This is a blessing. And you could have an older sibling that you respect, or it could be that you're the eldest one. But Jupiter in Libra in the 11th house will bring you great gains throughout life, great amounts of money, success, and prosperity as well. So let's say you have a Sagittarius rising and your Jupiter sits in your 12th house. This means your Jupiter is in Scorpio, and this means you will go to great depths to try to understand everything, and especially understanding things of the past. You like to uncover history. Furthermore, you can have prophetic deep dreams. I want you to have a dream journal because your dreams are giving you information. And things of the past. You relish in old memories. Reminiscing about things brings you joy and happiness to think about the good things that have happened before. But also, you could find that you travel extensively to foreign places. You love foreign countries, foreign people, and learning about their cultures. So this is a very healing position. You are really able and easily to let go of the past and any of your grievances. And that is a true beautiful blessing that you possess. Okay, so this pretty much covers all of the positions of Jupiter through all 12 houses and the power and the abilities of the incredible inspirational sign of Sagittarius. So with that, I'd like to close. Remember, if you would like to learn Vedic astrology with me, you can go to my university website. It's starting this month, July. Go to universityofvedicastrology.com and become a part of our community. And remember, if you're not getting my free newsletter, go to galacticcenter.org, sign up for my free newsletter, and subscribe to my new magazine, Joni Patry's Astrology Insights. Thank you.